It all began with a single sentence that cut deeper than any blade. "You never really belonged in this family," Stella spat during one of our heated arguments, her voice cold and unyielding. The words hung in the air like daggers, piercing through every ounce of hope I had left for reconciliation. That night, as I lay awake on the couch, my bed now, since things turned sour, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. It wasn't just the fight, or even Stella's harsh words. It was the eerie silence of the house, a stillness so unnatural it felt suffocating. The next morning, I walked into the living room, coffee cup in hand, only to be struck by an unsettling realization. Our family photos, the ones we'd proudly displayed over the years, were different. No, not different. Altered. In each frame, I was gone. My smiling face at Yellowstone, my arm around Delilah during Christmas, my proud grin beside Stella at her prom meticulously erased, leaving behind awkward gaps where I once stood. At first I thought I was imagining things, but no. Someone had deliberately removed me from every memory, every moment of joy we'd shared. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed other changes too. My favorite mug, the one Stella used to joke about stealing when she grew up, was missing from the kitchen cabinet. The books I kept on the shelf, gone. Even the old blanket I loved to wrap myself in while watching movies with Stella had vanished without a trace. It was as if they were trying to erase me, not just from their lives, but from existence itself. And then it hit me. This wasn't coincidence. This was calculated. Miles, Stella's biological father, whom I hadn't seen in years, must have been pulling strings from afar. He didn't need to show his face to tear us apart. He'd already planted seeds of doubt and resentment in Stella's mind. Every argument, every slammed door, every icy glare from Delilah, all made sense now. They weren't just pushing me away. They were systematically erasing me. And worst of all, I realized I might already be too late to fix it. The tension between Stella and me escalated into a suffocating war of silence and sharp words. She began treating me like an intruder in my own home, her every action laced with venomous intent. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through work emails, she deliberately dialed Miles' number on speakerphone right in front of me. "Hey, Dad," she chirped, her voice dripping with exaggerated sweetness. "Just wanted to tell you how much I appreciate having a real father who actually cares." The word real hit me like a punch to the gut, but I said nothing, choosing instead to retreat further into myself. That same night, I tried to bridge the widening gap by offering to help Stella study for her chemistry exam. It was something we used to do together, without hesitation. Those sessions were once filled with laughter and shared snacks. But now when I placed the textbook on her desk, she glared at it. "I don't need your pity," she screamed, swiping the book off the table so violently that it slammed against the wall. Her outburst echoed through the house, leaving behind a deafening silence that felt heavier than any argument ever could. For a moment, all I could do was stare at her, my heart pounding with equal parts frustration and sorrow. Miles' shadow loomed larger each day, poisoning Stella's perception of me. Every attempt I made to connect was met with comparisons that cut deeper than knives. "My real dad would never force me to study like this," she spat during another heated exchange. "Or worse, he understands me better than you ever could." These weren't just idle remarks, they were calculated blows meant to push me away completely. What hurt most wasn't the words themselves, but the cold detachment in her eyes, as though she no longer recognized the man who had been there for her countless times over the past 3 years. It became clear that Miles wasn't just back in Stella's life. He was systematically dismantling everything I had built with her. Each conversation ended with her storming off, slamming doors hard enough to rattle the walls. And yet, despite the pain, I couldn't bring myself to give up entirely. Deep down, I knew Stella wasn't acting out of malice, but confusion, a child torn between two worlds, manipulated by someone who didn't deserve her trust. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the truth about Miles revealed itself like a venomous snake slithering out of the shadows. He wasn't just an absent father who had conveniently disappeared from Stella's life. He was a professional con artist, a master manipulator, with a trail of shattered families and empty bank accounts stretching across the country. Each victim he left behind was another scar on his record, yet here he was now, waltzing back into our lives as if nothing had happened. And Stella, she was his next target. Miles didn't storm in guns blazing. Instead, he employed psychological warfare so subtle it was almost poetic in its cruelty. He called Stella daily, sending texts filled with saccharine sweetness. "You deserve better than this, sweetheart. A bright future is waiting for you, but only I can show you the way." His words dripped with false sincerity, designed to make her feel special, chosen, as though no one else, not even Delilah or me, could ever understand her dreams the way he did. Every conversation seemed innocent enough at first glance, but beneath the surface lay layers of manipulation. Each sentence carefully crafted to plant seeds of doubt about my role in her life. The worst part? He convinced Stella that I was the root of all her problems. "He's trying to take my place," Miles whispered during one of their late-night calls, his voice dripping with feigned hurt. "Your mom let him into our family, and now he thinks he can replace me. But deep down, you know where your loyalty belongs." The accusation stung not because it was true, it wasn't, but because Stella believed it. Her eyes, once warm and curious, turned cold whenever they landed on me, as though she saw me not as a person but as an intruder determined to steal what little connection she still had with her real dad. What made Miles truly dangerous, however, wasn't just his charm or lies, it was his ability to exploit vulnerabilities. He preyed on Stella's insecurities, amplifying them until she questioned everything: her grades, her friendships, even her own worth. "Why settle for someone pretending to care when you have a real father who understands?" he'd say, twisting her pain into justification for his schemes. By the time I realized the extent of his web, it felt like we were already too far gone. The transformation in Stella was as sudden as it was devastating. She stopped attending classes, her once perfect attendance record now a ghost of its former self. Her friends called less and less, their invitations met with curt rejections or outright silence. Instead, she spent hours locked away in her room, her phone glowing like a lifeline to another world, a world where Miles reigned supreme. Family dinners became a relic of the past. Her chair remained empty, pushed back against the wall as if signaling her permanent absence. When I knocked on her door one evening, hoping to coax her out for even a brief conversation, I heard only the faint buzz of her phone vibrating inside. Then came the day that shattered whatever fragile hope I still clung to. Passing by her slightly ajar bedroom door, I froze at the sight before me. There stood Stella, twirling in front of the mirror in an expensive dress, Miles's gift, no doubt. The fabric shimmered under the soft light, but it wasn't the garment that cut through me. It was her whisper, barely audible yet piercing. "This is who I'm meant to be. This is my real life." Her voice trembled not with excitement, but with something darker, more desperate. In that moment, I felt utterly powerless, watching the daughter I had tried so hard to love and protect slip further into a web spun by someone who cared nothing for her. Her descent into Miles's orbit reached new heights, or depths, with a single Instagram post. The photo showed Stella seated beside Miles at an upscale restaurant, her smile radiant and unfamiliar. The caption read, "Finally found where I belong." Thousands of likes poured in within hours, accompanied by comments gushing over how perfect they looked together. But behind every glowing emoji lay ignorance, the blissful unawareness of those scrolling strangers who couldn't see the manipulation lurking beneath the surface. What hurt most wasn't just the public declaration of loyalty to Miles. It was the stark contrast between the Stella I knew and this stranger staring back at me from the screen. Gone was the girl who used to laugh uncontrollably during movie nights, replaced by someone cold, distant, and unreachable. Each notification on her phone seemed like another nail driven into the coffin of our relationship. And though I wanted to scream, to shake her awake, all I could do was stand there, watching helplessly as she drifted farther away. The deeper I dug into Miles's schemes, the more sinister his web revealed itself to be. It wasn't just Stella he was targeting. It was an entire network of families, each one lured in through their children like bait on a hook. His modus operandi was chillingly systematic: befriend the child, exploit their insecurities, then use them as leverage to extract money from trusting parents. As I scoured online records and pieced together fragments of evidence, my blood ran cold at the realization that Stella wasn't alone. There were others, dozens of them caught in this labyrinth of lies. One fateful afternoon, while following a lead about another family who had fallen victim to Miles's startup, I walked into a local cafe for coffee and froze mid-step. There he was, sitting casually by the window, with a smug grin plastered across his face. Our eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. He didn't look surprised, in fact, he appeared almost amused. Leaning back in his chair, he smirked. "You really think you can protect her? She's already chosen me." The arrogance in his voice made my fists clench, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time or place for confrontation. Instead, I decided to turn his game against him. If Miles wanted investors, then I'd give him one: an eager participant, willing to throw money into his so-called revolutionary tech company. I began gathering every piece of documentation I could find: fraudulent business registrations, emails detailing his scams, even testimonials from other victims. Each discovery fueled my resolve, but what truly sealed his fate was Stella herself. When she forwarded me months' worth of incriminating texts and emails between her and Miles, I knew we had enough to take him down. With Ryan's connections at the DA's office and Quinn's friend at the SEC, I orchestrated a plan to expose Miles during his grand investment dinner. It would be risky, but failure wasn't an option, not when Stella's future hung in the balance. Every step of the way, I reminded myself why I was doing this, not out of vengeance, but to ensure no other family would suffer because of him. The night of Miles's grand investment dinner arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. He had chosen an upscale restaurant, its chandeliers casting a warm glow over tables adorned with crisp, white linens. As I watched from a distance, my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. Miles was in his element, effortlessly charming potential victims with tales of Silicon Valley connections and guaranteed returns. His confidence radiated as he handed out sleek folders detailing his so-called revolutionary startup. Stella sat beside him, her expression unreadable but tense, while other families listened intently. Just as Miles reached for the pen to finalize the first transfer of fund Stella's college money, the doors swung open. 2 federal agents strode in, their presence commanding immediate silence. The room froze, forks hovering midair, eyes wide with shock. "Miles Carter," one agent announced, "you're under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and securities violations." Chaos erupted as Miles's face transformed from smug assurance to sheer panic. He lunged toward the exit, knocking over a waiter in his desperation, but security intercepted him before he could take more than 3 steps. As they cuffed him, Miles turned to Stella, his voice trembling with desperation. "Sweetheart, this is all a misunderstanding. I only wanted what's best for you. How can you betray me like this?" His words hung heavy in the air, dripping with manipulation. For a moment, Stella hesitated, her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Then she stood up, her posture unwavering. Looking him straight in the eye, she said coldly, "You are not my father." It was as if those 5 words shattered whatever hold he still had on her. One by one, other victims came forward, their voices breaking as they recounted how Miles had stripped them of their savings, their dreams, their trust. A mother clutched her teenage son's hand, tears streaming down her face as she thanked Stella for exposing the truth. Another man, barely holding back sobs, revealed how Miles had convinced him to invest his daughter's education. Fund all, gone now. Each story added weight to the gravity of what Stella had done, not just for herself, but for countless others. In that moment, I saw something remarkable in Stella. Strength. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She was a survivor, standing tall against the man who had tried to destroy her future. And though the scars would remain, they no longer defined her. In the weeks following Miles's arrest, the house fell into an eerie quiet, broken only by Stella's restless tossing and turning at night. Her nightmares were vivid, haunting. She would wake up drenched in sweat, gasping for air as if trying to escape invisible chains. I could hear her muffled sobs through the walls, each sound piercing my heart like shards of glass. But instead of barging in uninvited, I waited outside her door, giving her space until she was ready to let me in. One particularly bad night, she called out softly, her voice trembling with vulnerability. Can you sit with me?" It wasn't much, but it was a start. During the day, Stella seemed lost in thought, her eyes distant as though replaying every moment of betrayal over and over again. She began writing a lot. At first it was just fragments scribbled on scraps of paper or typed late at night when she thought no one was watching. Then came the essay for her college application, a raw and unflinching account of everything that had happened. The final line struck me deeply. Sometimes the only way to heal is to face the truth, no matter how painful it may be. Reading those words felt like witnessing her transformation. They weren't just sentences on paper, but declarations of resilience. To mark our reunion, Delilah suggested a small family gathering. She even brought out her old camera, eager to capture the moment. But Stella shook her head firmly. "No photos," she said, her voice steady despite the weight behind it. "We don't need to fix the old pictures. Let's make new memories instead." Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound, a reminder that healing isn't about erasing scars, it's about learning to live alongside them. That evening, we shared a meal together, laughter slowly returning to fill the silence. For the first time in months, it felt like home. But beneath the surface, I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Healing never is. Yet, seeing Stella take ownership of her story gave me hope, not just for her future, but for ours as a family. The kitchen buzzed with quiet warmth as Stella stirred the pasta sauce, her laughter filling the air. Delilah sat at the table, a book in hand, glancing up occasionally with a soft smile. The scars of their past lingered, but they had learned to heal together. "I don't need a perfect dad," Stella said suddenly, her voice steady yet tender. "I just need someone who'll stay, no matter how bad things get." Her words hung in the air, a testament to her growth. Later, flipping through the family album, I saw my face restored in every photo. I smiled, realizing happiness wasn't about grand gestures, it was in these simple, imperfect moments.